Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into the hidden grammar that brings order to chaos. Yeah, I'm talking about a set of rules that can organize pretty much everything, from a messy bookshelf to, well, all of human knowledge. So let me just start by asking you a question. Imagine you're standing in front of a mountain of books, an entire library's worth. How would you even begin to sort them? It sounds simple at first, but the second you start thinking about it, you realize just how incredibly complicated it is. I mean, sure, you could try organizing them by the color of the cover. It might look amazing on Instagram. Or maybe by size. But would either of those actually be useful? Probably not. You'd never find a single thing. What about by the author's height? Okay, that's just absurd, right? And even something that sounds logical, like organizing by the year they were published, well, that comes with its own set of problems.
See, this isn't really just about books. This is about a much, much bigger challenge. A challenge that one man decided to turn from a messy art form into a precise science. The question he was trying to answer was absolutely massive. How do you create a system that can logically organize all of human knowledge?
And that man was S.R. Ranganathan. This guy was so important in his field that he's actually known as the grammarian of library classification. He didn't just see organization as, putting things on shelves. To him, it was a deep, logical, almost philosophical process.
So his big idea, his breakthrough, was to chop this huge task up into 3 distinct phases, or what he called planes. Now we're going to focus on the first one because it's the most important one. It's where all the real thinking happens, long before you ever touch a single book.
And that leads us right into the first and, honestly, the most critical step in his entire system, creating the blueprint. He gave it a name, the idea plane. This is where the magic really starts.
So what on earth is the idea plan? Well, think of it like the invisible strategic planning phase. It's all brain work. It's where you lay out the entire foundation and map out the whole system. The key thing is, before you sort a single item, you have to decide on the rules of the game. If you get this part right, your library or your music playlist or your project folders, they'll practically organize themselves.
Okay, so you're in that planning phase. What's next? Well, now you've got to choose your tools. And in the world of classification, these tools have a specific name: characteristics. These are basically the criteria you're going to use to divide a big group of things into smaller, more manageable piles.
Ranganathan himself said a characteristic is any attribute that can split a group into at least 2 different subgroups, and he used this amazing metaphor for it. He called it a hammer to break a mass of knowledge into smaller pieces. I mean, what a perfect image, right?
But here's the thing. You can't just pick up any old hammer and start swinging. You need the right one for the job. And to help us choose wisely, Ranganathan gave us this brilliant little instruction manual, 4 key rules, which he called the canons of characteristics.
All right, rule number 1 is the canon of differentiation. Basically, this just means the character you pick has to actually, create a division. Trying to divide a flock of crows by their color? Totally useless. They're all black. But dividing a group of students by their major? Now that creates distinct, meaningful groups. Your tool has to actually work.
Next up is the canon of relevance. So a characteristic might work, but is it actually helpful for what you're trying to do? Let's say your goal is to select a sports team. Knowing what language a person speaks at home? Not very relevant. But their height, their weight, their physical strength? Now those are absolutely crucial. The tool has to be right for the job.
And rule number 3, the canon of ascertainability. This one's all about facts, not feelings. Your characteristic has to be something you can actually prove. It has to be objective, not based on someone's opinion. So you can't reliably divide teachers into groups of brilliant and dull, because that's totally subjective. But you can divide them by the subjects they teach. The data has to be solid.
And for rule 4, the canon of permanence, well, Ranganathan himself had this brilliantly witty example. He argued that a characteristic shouldn't always be changing. He even made a little joke that trying to classify Indian politicians by their party was a fool's errand because they switch sides so often. The point is, the attribute you choose needs to be stable.
So let's say you've picked your tools. You've used those 4 rules to choose the right ones. Great. But that's only half the battle. Now comes the really crucial third step. You have to use them in the right order. And this is governed by what Ranganathan called the canons of succession.
And you have to understand, it's not enough just to have the right characteristics. The sequence, the order you apply them in, can completely change the final result. If you get the order wrong, your perfect logical system can become a confusing, useless mess. It changes everything.
The first rule of order is the canon of concomitance. It's really just about being efficient. Don't use two different characteristics if they end up giving you the exact same group of things. So for instance, asking if a student is over 20 and then asking if they were born before 2005. You're just asking the same question twice. Each step you take needs to create a new, more specific subdivision.
But check this out. This is where it gets really powerful. The canon of relevant succession shows how your purpose completely dictates the structure. Let's say you're organizing books for general readers. What's the most helpful first step? Well, language, right? A reader has to actually be able to read the book. Then you'd sort by form. Are they looking for a novel or maybe poetry? And then finally, by author. It's a simple, logical path for that user.
Okay, now what if your user is totally different? What if it's a historian who's studying the evolution of poetry? For them, that old order is totally useless. Their journey is completely different. First, they want all the poetry grouped together. That's step one. Then they need it sorted by historical period. And only then, way down the line, do they care about the language. So by simply reordering the exact same characteristics, you've created a totally unique, specialized system for a completely different need. This is genius, and it's exactly how sophisticated search algorithms work today. They are constantly reordering criteria based on what they think you want to find.
And the last rule of order is just wonderfully simple: the canon of consistent succession. All it means is that once you've figured out the best, most helpful sequence for a specific purpose, you have to stick with it every single time. That's what makes a system predictable, reliable, and something people can actually trust.
So, I know we've gone through some pretty specific, maybe even nerdy rules for organizing libraries, but why does any of this actually matter to you today? Well, because these ideas stretch way, way beyond dusty old bookshelves and right into the very fabric of our digital lives.
Ranganathan's Grammar of Organization. It's the invisible logic that's running in the background of your life right now. It's how Google figures out what to show you first. It's how Spotify recommends a new song you might love. It's even in the folder structure you use to organize your own files on your computer.
And that really brings us to the biggest takeaway here. The way we organize things is every bit as important as the things themselves. The structure we create isn't neutral, not at all. It actively shapes how we find information, how we end up using it, and ultimately how we understand the world around us.
So Ranganathan gave us the rules to organize all of human knowledge. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the hidden grammars, the invisible systems of classification that are quietly organizing your world right now?